Hello friends, I hope you are all doing good. I welcome you back to the Videsh Niti series, and the topic of discussion for today is the India's Middle East policy. So friends, if we look at the Middle East today, the Middle East as a area today, as a region today, is witnessing a lot of changes. And broadly, if we look at the new geopolitics which is taking shape in the region, we observe some very significant policy shifts which are happening there. For example, Iran and Saudi Arabia till now have been always at loggerheads with each other. One prime reason for that is that Iran is a Shia country and Saudi Arabia is a Sunni Muslim country. The problem between Iran and Saudi Arabia has always been that while at one point of time Saudi Arabia wanted to portray itself as the harbinger of the Sunni Islam and also the fountainhead of Sunni Islam, whereas Iran also wanted to reclaim its own glorious past of the Persian Empire and wanted to portray itself as the harbinger or the fountainhead of Shia Islam. Now, this power contestation between Iran and Saudi Arabia often led to proxy wars between the two countries in different Middle Eastern countries. For example, Iran and Saudi Arabia today are apparently fighting in Yemen and they are having a very close contestation there. Similarly, a contestation is happening between the two with respect to even Syria as such. But now, what has happened today is that this entire geopolitical contestation is witnessing a massive shift. Now, why is it witnessing a massive shift? Because there are various factors behind this. The first important factor often attributed is the factor called the Arab Spring. Arab Spring is a movement that began in the Middle East region in 2011. One of the major objective of the Arab Spring was to usher democracy, to bring in more transparency in the administration of these countries. Now, what has happened is that some of the regimes in the Middle East have accepted the demands of the people under the Arab Spring. Some have brought about some radical shifts in the way they undertake the governance of their countries. But some countries, like for example Syria, is one country which has refused to bring about any change because of the Arab Spring. So as a result of which, what has happened is that a country like Syria today is in a position where they do not want to compromise with the demands of the people. Similarly, there have been similar demands in Saudi Arabia for shift, but the House of Saud has tried to basically bring about a little bit of reforms internally and have created buffer cushions to ensure that the people there do not undertake such demands. However, the Arab Spring was not totally out and suddenly the world witnessed the COVID pandemic. Now when the COVID pandemic happened, the economies of the Middle East, they basically got very badly affected. One of the reasons why they got affected is primarily because these Middle Eastern countries were global oil suppliers. Now when the COVID pandemic happened and majority of the world entered into a global lockdown, at that time of the lockdown the demand of the oil decreased. Now when the demand of the oil decreased, these countries which were major oil suppliers and suppliers of oil to the global supply chains suddenly got badly affected, because now for these Middle Eastern countries they had nowhere to supply the oil as such, and considering that most of these countries were dependent upon oil supplies, these people got very badly affected with respect to their revenues. So again, the effect of the revenue came upon the people. There was a possibility stated by many scholars that the Arab world, because of the COVID pandemic, could now witness an Arab Spring 2.0. So now, in order to ensure that the focus is on economic recovery, to ensure that the Arab population does not come up again in a rebellion, most of these Arab countries today in the Middle East have recalibrated their foreign policies. For example, it is very surprising to see now that Saudi Arabia and Iran are talking to each other. It is equally surprising to see that Saudi Arabia has buried all their inhibitions and reservations that they had with respect to Qatar. For example, again, Turkey, which also had some regional supremacy ambitions to revive their Ottoman Empire once, now is playing an important role, because Erdogan is also going to witness an election in Turkey in 2023, and Erdogan definitely doesn't want to go into an election year with a pandemic and a badly affected economy. So we see one very important thing, as I said earlier in the beginning today, that most of these Arab countries are witnessing radical shifts. They are trying to improvise the relationships amongst themselves. And all this has also been affected because of one another important major change. That major change is the shift in the US policy. The Americans till now were always interested in basically providing all support to the Middle East. And Americans were also heavily dependent upon oil supplies from the Middle East. But in the recent times, what has happened since the time of Obama administration is that Americans have started focusing on using their own shale gas reserves and have started switching over to cleaner fuels. Consequently, the demand of the oil from the Middle East for the Americans have decreased. Also, at the same time, the Americans have shifted their global focus from Middle East now to that of Indo-Pacific. And today the larger challenge for America to tackle is basically a rising China, which they perceive as a hegemonic country trying to decimate the Americans and the American supremacy. So it is in this backdrop that these regional countries have understood one thing, that rather than having regional ambitions, it would be better for them to cooperate with each other, and it would be better for them that they collectively come together with each other, because today there is a void left by the Americans. It is in this backdrop that we now see that what can India do. So India till now has always adopted a three-string policy. Now this three-string policy is that India has always made a complete balance in the Middle East between the Shias, the Sunnis and the Jews. So while at one place India has always engaged deeply with Saudi Arabia, India has also had a equally nourishing relationship with Iran, and India has never neglected the Jews, specifically after recognizing them in the 1990s diplomatically. So India has always managed to engage with all the three countries, which were the three main regional players in the Middle East, very effectively. Now, this engagement has got more deepened since 2014. India's engagement in the Middle East region has increased drastically since 2014, specifically because now the Narendra Modi government has been investing heavily with engaging with Saudi Arabia at one place, engaging with Israel by visiting Israel, and also at the same time by undertaking visits to Iran. So what has happened because of this deepening of the engagement of India since 2014 is that it has had some good domestic implications also. For instance, when we abrogated Article 370 of our constitution with respect to Kashmir, which purely was an internal decision of India, it was very surprising to see, number one, that none of the Arab countries raised an objection to it except Turkey for certain specific regions, which we do not need to discuss here because that's a part of India-Turkey relationship. Second, Saudi Arabia, which till now had always been outrightly pro-Pakistan with respect to Kashmir, also had a very toned down response and stated that the abrogation of Article 370 is an internal matter of India. Thirdly, there have been a lot of fugitive offense and economic offenders who have left India and are hiding in United Arab Emirates and other Arab states. With the deepening of the cooperation today, India is able to undertake the criminal exchange very easily, and India has in the recent times also signed certain extradition treaties that have facilitated the transfer of these fugitive economic offenders. So it is in this backdrop we see that our earlier three-string policy, combined with our deepening of engagement since 2014, has definitely helped us. And now, the new changing dynamics that we have observed today in the Middle East are definitely going to have implications in a very positive way for India. Because if the regional players in the Middle East drop their ambitions and start cooperating with each other, and after dropping these ambitions, if they start integrating with each other as the COVID pandemic has brought them together, there is a high possibility that these countries are going to further create more space for India to grow. Because today, if Iran and if Saudi Arabia talk to each other, today, if Saudi Arabia and Qatar talk to each other, Today, if UAE and Israel talk to each other, it also creates space for India to engage with all of them. And considering that India has had good diplomacy with all of these three major countries in the Middle East, today India can also become a very important force in bringing the region closer. This is one place where India can start shaping global events. And the shaping of the global events can begin with shaping of the regional events in the Middle East. This reflects very well with India's global power aspirations that we aspire for. So, one thing is very clear, the future of our Middle East policy, as of now at least, looks pretty bright. And it is in this context that India should continue to engage with this region and also at the same time deepen the ties in multiple dimensions of economic engagement so that it can become a net development provider, net security provider, and also an economic engager or an integrator in the region. Thank you.